Just when I thought that I had heard pretty much everything there is to know about the religion of Islam, or I should say the death cult of Islam, turns out there's certain stories that I have not heard. And this one made me laugh a lot. And I have to thank my friend Warren McCommon over on X for sharing this story with me. And it's also from Dr. David Wood of Apologetics Roadshow. If you haven't seen any of his work, you should definitely check it out. And the title of this video, Can Muslims Explain the Weirdest Story About Muhammad? Muhammad and the Men of Al-Zut. Now, this all came about when Warren McCommon sends a comment to me about Evan Al Kilgore, whatever the hell his name is, because I called him a dingbat. And Warren McCommon, because Evan was siding with obviously Candy Owens, Tucker Carlson, all the dingbats, right? And I was just going, of course, because you're a dingbat. And Warren commented, he will get zooted even more. You already know what zoot is, right? I had no idea what he was talking about. So I commented, no, I don't. And then Warren sends me this video from Dr. David Wood, and I could not stop laughing. It is literally one of the funniest stories I have heard in a long time. Maybe because I've got a very dirty sense of humor. I don't know. Or maybe it's because Muslims actually revere and worship the Prophet Muhammad, and what the men of Al-Zut did to Prophet Muhammad was just, oh my goodness. You guys have definitely got to listen to this story, and you'll probably be on the floor in stitches like I was. I needed to share this with you guys because it was too funny. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, here is Dr. David Wood sharing the story for us all of Muhammad and the big black men, probably from Pakistan, of Al-Zut. Have a watch.
Weird stories in the Muslim sources. Stories that make you wonder, why, in the name of common sense, would anyone ever write down something like this? But I challenge you to find a weirder, creepier, more disturbing story than the tale of Muhammad's late-night desert rendezvous with the men of Al-Zut. Since Raymond Ibrahim has already done the research on Muhammad's romantic encounter, we'll let Raymond break down the details.
This odd hadith, which I'm about to narrate, appears in several hadith collections, including the highly esteemed Musnad of Ibn Hanbal, founder of one of Islam's 4 schools of laws, or madhahib, as well as in many other well-respected Islamic texts, all of which are being taught in Al-Azhar.
So, the scholars know about this, but like so many other issues the scholars hide from us, this story hasn't worked its way to the general population. Until now.
The hadith, which is narrated by Abdullah bin Mas'ud, a companion of the Prophet and one of Islam's most reliable and trustworthy transmitters of hadith, goes as follows. Brace yourself. Abdullah begins by telling us that Muhammad called on him to accompany him on a trip into the desert. When they reached a certain place and night had fallen, Muhammad made a line in the sand, most likely a circle, and told Abdullah, quote, "Stay behind this line and do not cross it, for if you do, you will die."
Muhammad drew a line in the sand and warned his companion, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, not to cross it. Let's call this line the Diddy line, as in, Muhammad didn't just cross that line, did he? We could also call it the Cuck line for reasons that will soon be clear.
Muhammad then left his startled companion and walked into the desert night, about the distance of a hurled stone, says Abdullah. Before long, our narrator saw a group of men, he does not specify how many, who, quote, appeared to be Al-Zut. He describes them as, quote, tall, lean, and naked.
So, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was behind the Diddy line, the Cuck line, but Muhammad crossed the Diddy line, and he was soon surrounded by a number of tall, lean, naked men, the men of Al-Zut.
Other Islamic sources say these Zut were a black-skinned people, and we'll get into that later. After describing them, Abdullah goes on, and here's the problematic part, to say, quote, they went to and began to ride the Prophet of Allah.
They did what now?
They went to and began to ride the Prophet of Allah. Literally, that's what the Arabic says. These tall, black, naked men rode Muhammad. The Arabic word yarkabun, which I will presently discuss, can also be translated as mounted. And they did this all night long, says Abdullah.
These tall, lean, black, naked men mounted Muhammad in the desert and rode him all night long, while his companion Abdullah ibn Masud watched from behind the cuck line.
During which time they would also come and circle around and try to reach him, but they were prevented apparently from the line of protection Muhammad had drawn in the sand for his companion. Abdullah concludes his narration, quote, I was extremely terrified by them, so I sat down. With the coming of dawn, they began to depart. Then the Prophet of Allah returned, slowly and in pain from that which they did while riding him.
These tall, lean, black, naked men tried to get to Ibn Masud, but he was protected by the Diddy line. He was terrified, so he sat down. When dawn arrived, the tall, lean, black, naked men left, and Muhammad came stumbling back to Ibn Masud, slowly, because he was in pain from these tall, lean, black, naked men riding him all night long.
According to another narration found in several Islamic texts, including Akhbar Mecca by Al-Fakahi, Muhammad complained to Abdullah that, quote, they wounded me all night long, at which point the Prophet proceeds to lay his head and fall asleep in Abdullah's lap.
Poor Muhammad was all tuckered out from these tall, lean, black, naked men riding him all night long, and he fell asleep with his head resting on Ibn Masud's lap. Yes, Muhammad liked resting his head on men's laps to fall asleep. Just ask Dihya al-Kalbi. But who were these guys who mounted him and rode him all night long? Turns out, when they're described as black, it doesn't mean African.
Who are these al-Zut, these naked men who rode Muhammad all night long? According to Islam's written records, they were a migrant people from India or modern-day Pakistan, described in the sources as very tall, very dark-skinned, very lean, strong and hardy, and often used for labor-intensive work.
Sounds like Muhammad was using them for some labor-intensive work.
The question that Dr. David Wood posed in the very beginning, I also had the exact same question. What would possess anyone to write down this particular kind of story about the Prophet Muhammad, considering the fact that all Muslims that worship Islam actually worship the Prophet Muhammad? I wonder how many Muslims actually know about this particular story. Because, I mean, what a very, very weird story. But it does make kind of a lot of sense to me, considering how many Muslim men like watching Pakistani boys dance in front of them, because it's all part of a ritual, right? And the men of al-Zut apparently were from Pakistan. Now, maybe it was the way that Dr. David Wood told this story, or maybe it's like the absolute absurdity of it, or the fact that many, many Muslims across the world worship this guy named Muhammad, who was ridden all night long by the men of al-Zut. I just couldn't, man. I couldn't. I was dying of laughter when I was listening to this. It is such a funny, outrageous, and absurd story. Why? And by the way, you can't cross the Didi line, but the men of al-Zut tried. They tried to cross the Didi line to get to Muhammad's orator, or the guy that wrote it all down. Maybe the Muhammad's friend watching all this unfold, and then watch Muhammad crawl, because he was absolutely exhausted, crawl and then collapse in this man's lap, because that's what men do, by the way. They fall and they collapse in other men's laps after being ridden all night long by other big black men. Oh, dear. So, ladies and gentlemen, maybe this guy felt so sorry about Muhammad that he had to, like, he's going, no one is going to believe this story. So I've got to record this, guys. I have got to write this down, because if I don't write it down, no one's going to believe me. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know whether or not Muslims are able to actually explain this kind of weird, crazy story because, man, I thought that I knew a lot about the religion of Islam. Turns out that there's so many hadiths, so many stories that are very weird, wild, and outrageous. Not just the Quran itself, but the hadiths, man. I mean, the hadiths reveal lots and lots and lots about the Prophet Muhammad. Not the fact that he a 9-year-old and married a 6-year-old. No, not just that, along with all the other wives that he had too, but also this story in particular. I love to see an imam explain this story. It's probably because the Prophet Muhammad got graped by men over and over and over again all night long, by the way. All night long. Reminds me of the, dear, that Richie song. What's his name? I'm blanking on his name. I'm just like, I'm gobsmacked by this. But yeah, anyway, it was just a fantastic story, isn't it? It's one of those stories where you just go, that actually happened. Otherwise, why in the world did they record it? Either that or they've got some weird, crazy imagination. And wow. Yeah. Oh dear, oh dear. Anyway, I just thought that I would share this because it is absolutely hilarious and give my take on it. I needed something to laugh because it's been a very hard week. But anyway, you guys take care, be blessed, and I'll see you all in the next video.